Well, the second impeachment of Donald Trump is here. Hi, Dave from Informed American here to tell you everything you need to know as the second impeachment of Donald Trump kicks off. I want to know, first question to everybody, are you going to be watching? I want to know what you think. Comment down below, and I certainly want you to comment down below on everything. You can catch the stream. I believe it starts today at 1 p.m., certainly on C-SPAN. I'm sure if you poke around on some of your cable news stations or simply go to YouTube and you can definitely find the stream there. I want to know what you think. Are you going to watch? Do you care? As we kick off the second impeachment of Donald Trump, I'm going to walk through everything you need to know. But first, I want to get to something that has basically been put aside, which is another round of stimulus that Congress is debating. The House has outlined as an outline for what they might pass. But before they can do that, what do they need to do? What is the most pressing item on the agenda for Congress? It is, yes, the second impeachment of Donald Trump. I want to cut quickly to a video here from Sam Zell, billionaire investor, his thoughts on stimulus.
Part of this, though, is being fueled by the stimulus package that we've already gotten. What happens if we get, which is very likely, an even bigger stimulus package now? Could that keep the music playing for quite some time?
Well, I'm hopeful that the next stimulus package is really directed to the people who need help. I'm not sure that, a $2,000 check to a college student is necessarily productive, whereas there are people who are, not getting enough to eat, and so therefore, the idea that we're issuing a stimulus package to everybody. Households of $300,000, $200,000 a year of income. I think what you're doing is you're just creating a bunch of surplus capital that's floating around, and everybody's trying to figure out what to do with it. And isn't this a fun way to gamble? And since it's the government's money, you didn't have it before, you didn't need it. Why not roll the dice and see what happens?
All right, so those are the thoughts of Sam Zell. I want to know what you think about that. He's essentially saying, send it to the people who need it, or at least not necessarily a college student or those making over $200,000 or $300,000. What do you think about that? Now, there is another piece here, which he mentioned at the end, which is people having extra money that they don't need in gambling. Now, what did this Wall Street billionaire mean by that? Well, he doesn't want you to take that extra money and put it in the market, as we saw, as people potentially have done with the GameStop stock, to go upset the Wall Street billionaire's plans. So he does have a little bit of a selfish motive there. But I want to know, too, what do you think about that, this idea? And certainly, and I've talked to this, I've talked about this with Rodney as well on Friday mornings of Get Informed, episodes of Get Informed American. And Rodney seems to share a similar sentiment, which is rather than giving just blanket money to everybody, make it more targeted. So I want to know your thoughts on that. Now, the draft from the House of Representatives looks like this: $1,400 checks, not the $2,000 that Sam Zell mentioned, and that Joe Biden said would be going out the door immediately. No, not $2,000, $1,400 for a single person making up to $75,000 and a married couple making $150,000. Now, if you're married and you have two dependents, that number could be $5,600. It certainly would be helping a family. Now, Senator Joe Manchin. Senator Joe Manchin wants that threshold lowered to $50,000 and $100,000 for a couple. So I want to know what you think about just general thoughts on stimulus. One, do we even need another round of stimulus? Two, what do you think of the House proposal here? Do you agree with Sam that we should make this more targeted? Maybe not a college student and not anyone making say couples making $200,000 or $300,000. Now, I think the absolute limit in this Democrat proposal would be $200,000 for a couple, and I believe that would include dependents and stuff like that. So that is the threshold, $200,000. But should it be lower? Should it be $100,000? Should it be $75,000? Let me know your thoughts below. All right, so let's get to the main thing that's kicking off today. But I wanted to mention that. I wanted to mention the stimulus negotiations and the news around that because it is being delayed so they can impeach a former president. here we go. The big day's finally arrived. After weeks of lead up, the first session of Trump's impeachment trial will feature presentations from both sides over Senate's authority to hear the case, followed by a vote on the matter. That's important because one of the arguments and part of Trump's defense, which I'll get to in just a second, is whether this thing is constitutional or not. I did a video on that about 2 weeks ago. If you want to check out that, I laid that out a little bit more in detail, so go ahead and check that out. Also, alternatively, uninformedamerican.com, Rodney wrote a piece saying that it is constitutional, so there's a bit of a debate going on. There's going to be a simple, before anything, I mean, there's a possibility that maybe that they'll just vote this thing down and say it's not constitutional, but it's unlikely. And you expect the usual suspects on the Republican aisle, like Mitt Romney and Susan Collins, will vote that it is constitutional. Also, interestingly, in the it not being constitutional argument is that John Roberts, Chief Justice John Roberts, is not presiding over this trial because he believes it's his duty to only preside over trials of sitting presidents. So now Democrat Senator Pat Leahy will be presiding over the trial, and he promises to be nonpartisan, of course. But we expect the constitutionality vote to go through. And when it does, here's basically the argument here against Trump. Presidents do not get a free pass to commit high crimes and misdemeanors near the end of their term. That's the argument here. You know, just because you're on your way out doesn't mean you can go do awful things. You must be held accountable. That's a Democrat argument. That's what the impeachment managers argued in a brief last week. This is on Monday. Trump's lawyer said the president didn't incite the crowd and that rioters who breached the Capitol, quote, did so of their own accord and for their own reasons. What do you think of that? Do you think President Trump's words inspired people to storm the Capitol and be violent and riot? Or did they do it on their own accord? That's the argument from the Trump people. Is it Trump, and this is this argument over the word fight, I think that Trump used the word fight a little more than a handful of times, each time in a figurative sense. Now, I will say on the president's, in his defense, he uses the word fight all the time. I mean, I think that was a common word he used, you know, fight, fight, fight. I don't think at any point other than this speech in January 6th, where you never heard him say, well, or in other words, he wasn't being accused of inciting violence for using the word fight. But maybe the context is a little different. Making no explicit mention, Trump made no explicit mention of rioting, and defense attorneys added that the president was exercising his First Amendment rights. Interesting. Democrat impeachment managers acting as prosecutors during the trial responded that in their one-page brief, Trump has no valid excuse or defense for his actions. His efforts to escape accountability are entirely unraveling. So here we are. This is the schedule, so you kind of know what to expect here. So today, February 9th, will be 4 hours of debate equally divided between the prosecutors and defense on whether the trial is constitutional. And as we mentioned, there will be a vote following that. You need a simple majority for that. So I guess even if, since John Roberts is not presiding, and in the first impeachment, Roberts refused to vote as well, saying this was up to an elected official. So even if all 50 Republican senators vote that this is unconstitutional, presumably Senator Pat Leahy, who although is impartial, would likely vote that the impeachment trial is constitutional. So that's what we're getting today. So it seems like all of today will simply be about whether or not this trial is constitutional or not. And we expect it to be ruled that it is. And then so we'll head into tomorrow, starting at noon, February 10th. House of Representatives will begin arguing its case. Prosecutors and defense will have up to 16 hours each to present their arguments, with neither side permitted to present more than 8 hours a day. And then this will basically continue through February 12th. And it looks like there's going to be some kind of a break on Saturday, and then we'll reconvene on Sunday. This argument will be followed by 4 hours for senators' questions, and the House impeachment managers want to call witnesses and subpoena documents. And there'll be 2 hours of debate by each side, followed by a Senate vote on whether to allow this. If witnesses are called, I expect they will be, but you never know. And by the way, there was this little bit of a kerfuffle about the House managers wanted President Trump to testify, and he simply refused, calling it a farce. Now, he didn't testify the first time around. There's no obligation for him to testify, so really not a big deal there, but I think they wanted to get Trump up on the stand just to see what he would say. It says if witnesses are called, as I expect they will be, there will be enough time given to depose them for each party to complete discovery before testimony is given. Once witnesses and evidence is dealt with, there will be 4 hours of closing arguments divided evenly by prosecutors and defense. Lastly, the vote on conviction or acquittal for 2/3 majority is required. And now, so this could go into next Monday, but could be wrapped up by next Monday. So this thing could move quickly and be over with. Now, if so Trump, as I mentioned, Trump's not going to testify. We'll see what the witnesses are and what the heck they will say. I don't know. Now, there was one report out there floating around that there was some White House aide who reportedly said that Trump was very happy to see the riot footage, as this is being described as a smoking gun. But there's no, other than that, I believe that was anonymous, so we don't know who that person is. Maybe that person will testify. We'll see. We've heard there's been a lot of smoking guns during Trump's presidency, which tend to just peter out. So it remains to be seen what happens there. Now, of course, as we talked about before, if Trump is found guilty, there will then be another vote triggered to determine whether or not he should be allowed to hold office or not, which will require a simple majority. But they also, so beyond that, some other things about Trump's Secret Service detail, his pension, those things could be up for grabs. But the biggest thing is to further humiliate Trump and anyone that supported him. That is really the major game here, I think, to me is clear. I don't think, as I've discussed, I don't think that Trump is going to want to run in 2024. The guy's got no social media, and if he starts any kind of a political organization, it will be infested with the FBI. So he's got no chance there. So that's kind of the way I see it. Now, if you're curious about Trump's defense, I can go over it. I'm going to go over this really quickly. Now, one of the things I mentioned, and you won't see here in this brief, and I can't make this any bigger, but I'll just hit the highlights to you. As I mentioned, I believe it was last week, that Trump's legal team, his entire legal team, had quit over the reason that Trump wanted to make part of his defense I'm sorry, let me start that. Trump wanted to make voter fraud part of his legal defense, and his team quit over that. Now, as I go through this brief here, followed by his defense, there's no mention of voting at all. I don't see anything here, no allegations of voter fraud that I can see at all. The first thing here, statement of facts relative to the articles of impeachment. It's basically saying the single article of impeachment is belied by an analysis of Mr. Trump's spoken words. Okay, and Democrat members of the House drafted the article of impeachment before any investigation into the riot had even started. That's true. They did. They hit the impeach button basically. What was it, on the 7th or 8th of January? It says the House manager's statement of facts outlines a narrative irrelevant to the facts alleged in support of a single article of impeachment, and saying here that law enforcement had already had reports of violence, and the next thing here, the Senate. So this is basically goes to constitutionality and jurisdiction. The Senate lacks the constitutional jurisdiction to conduct an impeachment trial of a former president. Now, that will be settled today by a vote, so that may be rendered partially moot. But I guess this will be part of Trump's defense's arguments today. It says the text and structure of the articles discussing impeachment do not grant the Senate the authority of a former president. The Constitution only gives the Senate jurisdiction over the president, not the former president of the United States. That will be their argument. The founders knowingly did not extend the power of impeachment to former officials. Interesting. Further, Congress's power to impose penalties upon conviction of impeachment is limited to removal and not or disqualification. The impeachment violates Trump's First Amendment rights. Interesting. So that's part of Trump basically his right to speak. You can't impeach him over something he said, so long as that speech is not legal or is not illegal, I suppose would be part of their argument. The Senate cannot disregard the First Amendment and Supreme Court's long-standing free speech jurisprudence. Mr. Trump, as an elected official, has First Amendment rights to freely engage in political speech. The House afforded President Donald Trump no due process of law. The article is structurally deficient and can only result in acquittal. The article fails to state an impeachable offense as a matter of law. So that is President Trump's defense. Essentially, Democrats, you rolled out impeachment too quickly before there was an investigation. You're violating former president's First Amendment rights. You don't have jurisdiction to even do this constitutionally, and you just simply have no power to do this. That basically is their argument. Nothing here about voter fraud. So that has been dropped. I guess Trump didn't want his second legal team to quit either. So that is basically the Trump defense. And I want to know what you think about this defense. Is it a good defense? Is there some worry? And the main question will be, will this? I got some feedback from you last time when I posed this question about was that, even if you, let's just say you agree that Trump should say something about voter fraud, is it a good legal strategy? Is it a good defense strategy to use in his impeachment? And many of you who commented on that video said you're better off not bringing this stuff up because you could sway some senators who otherwise would vote to acquit to instead vote to convict based on President Trump bringing up voter fraud. So I want to know what you think about that. I want to know what you think of, first of all, you're going to watch this thing. Do you care? I want to know about that. What do you think of the stimulus stuff going on? And that was basically my main point earlier, is that while Congress should be doing something for Americans here on the stimulus front, no, this impeachment must take priority. So they have to clear this out for the week. And then maybe next week we'll see what happens with stimulus. I think that's pretty crappy, particularly when we've been hearing that the stimulus checks were going to go out the door. $2,000, by the way. No, you're not getting $2,000. And you, depending on your income, you may not be getting anything. Do you think that's a good idea? Do you agree with that? I want to know what you think about all of this. Do you agree? Do you think that this is all simply political theater and a distraction and something that Congress should be doing real work to help out Americans, but instead we're going to have to put up with this for a week? I want to know what you think about everything. If you're watching here on informedamerican.com, please comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on everything I've discussed. And if you're watching here on Facebook, please hit the like button, share this video with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, please also hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. We always want you to go to informedamerican.com where you can get real smart news. Thanks for watching.